In all of fiction, there are few men that more perfectly embody the first pillar of masculine leadership than James Bond. Sure, his personal life is something of a train wreck. He lacks even a modicum of empathy and seems utterly unable to commit, likely because the women he attracts into his life have the unfortunate habit of ending up dead. And he sure as hell is not a model of integrated or healthy masculinity. But for all of his faults and failures, you can't deny that the man has impeccable control over his emotional state and the way that he responds to stress, adversity, and fear. Whether he's holding frame after being rejected by Moneypenny, laughing through gritted teeth while being tortured by the villain, or calmly reloading his gun in the midst of a crazy shootout, he is the quintessential embodiment of the phrase calm, cool, and collected. And even though there's more to masculinity than simply controlling one's emotional response, this trait of emotional control, especially under extreme pressure, forms the bedrock of nearly all masculine development. Because for better or worse, a man's life is often defined by the way that he chooses to respond to fear. And this makes sense, because in some form or another, fear is at the heart of nearly all negative emotions that men experience in their lives. Everything else is simply a permutation of this core emotion. And when we go one layer deeper, we discover that nearly all non-masculine behaviors and traits are ultimately nothing more than an unconscious biological response to a perceived threat. In other words, fear. Whether it's emotional outbursts, neediness and clinginess, people-pleasing, passivity and submissiveness, laziness and procrastination, a lack of vision and drive or defensiveness, all of these emotions and behaviors have their roots in fear. Making the battle to tame your anxiety and consciously control your fear response one of the single most important battles that you will ever fight in the war for your masculine soul. Now, before we address the specific strategies for doing this, let's look at some common examples of how anxiety and threat response can manifest themselves as non-masculine behaviors in your relationships and life. For example, maybe your ex nagged or criticized you, violating your boundaries again and again. In your mind, you saw her actions as a threat to the relationship, your lifestyle, and your future potential for bearing children. And in response to this threat, your biology triggered a sense of anxiety, and you likely responded by either passively submitting, caving into her demands and being a good little boy, or by lashing out defensively from an emotional state and desperately trying to prove her wrong. Or maybe you're out on the town and you see a beautiful woman that you find interesting and you want to talk to. Subconsciously, though, your mind views the potential for rejection as a threat to your reputation, your standing with the tribe, and ultimately your life. Again, this triggers anxiety and causes you to slouch your shoulders, hang your head, and simply walk past her without a word. Even outside of your relationships, you can see this behavior and pattern manifest itself in your life. For example, maybe you want to start a business or pursue a new career, but your brain views the potential for failure as a threat to your physical safety. It triggers anxiety once more, and if you don't control it, this anxiety ultimately leads to apathy, laziness, and years of procrastination, as your brain sits by and tells you, failure is scary, it's dangerous, it's best if you don't even try. Now, logically, none of these responses make sense. Standing up for yourself to a naggy partner who repeatedly violates your boundaries may very well risk the relationship. But when you consider the issue rationally, you'll quickly realize that if standing your ground and stating your needs really does end your partnership, you were better off alone anyway. Going up to a woman that you find attractive, expressing interest, and saying hello doesn't put you in any sort of danger. And even if you are rejected, the disapproval of a stranger who knows almost nothing about you doesn't impact your life in any way. You won't lose your job, your friends aren't going to ditch you, and you aren't going to get kicked out of your city. The worst case scenario is that your life is exactly the same as it was before you walked up to her. And if you decide to start that new job or pursue that new career, so long as it's done strategically, nothing bad will happen. Even if you fail, you can put safeguards in place to ensure that you have something to fall back on. Again, the worst case scenario is that you try, fail, and end up exactly where you are right now. But the best case scenario is that your life changes forever. The problem is, your subconscious and evolutionary mind is not logical. It's emotionally reactive, running off of outdated software designed to keep you alive during a pre-agricultural society, where rejections, small mistakes, and missteps really could mean death. And ironically, this innate anxiety and intense paranoia is exactly what allowed us to become the apex predators of the planet and achieve the level of development that we enjoy today. But as the old saying goes, what got us here won't get us there. Our anxiety and threat response served a purpose. It wouldn't exist otherwise. And even though we as a species have outgrown the need for this high anxiety hardwiring, our brains still haven't acknowledged or adapted to this fact. Which means that it's up to us to exert our masculine will on ourselves and learn how to tame the wolf of fear lurking in the recesses of our mind. And to do this, we must make the unconscious conscious, learning how to separate our identities and responses from the emotions that we experience in any given moment. Now, the good news is, you've already begun this process as a part of this experience. Because simply by being aware of this phenomenon and understanding that the emotions you're experiencing and the primal reactions they encourage aren't necessarily a reflection of your reality, well, that's the first step toward mastering yourself. Think about it like being hungry or sleep deprived. When you know that the annoyance, frustration, and anger you're experiencing isn't necessarily you, but rather the result of the fact that you didn't sleep enough or you haven't eaten today, you're able to consciously choose how to respond, instead of allowing your negative biology to turn you into an asshole. And through the exercises and prescriptions given in previous modules and through the Unbreakable experience, you've begun the second part of this process by learning how to detach from those fear-based emotional states and extricate your identity from the fleeting feelings of the moment. So in this module, we'll help you deepen your practice to gain further control over your fear response, so that you're no longer reacting to stimuli and emotions from a place of unconscious anxiety, but consciously responding from your values, vision, and what you know to be true. And to accomplish this, we're going to use 3 very specific practices. The first is called Meditatio Malorum 2.0. Now, Meditatio Malorum, as you might know, means to contemplate adversity. And although we've already shared this concept inside of the Unbreakable experience, we're going to take it a step further. Because beyond simply identifying the potential adversities and trials you may experience, you can use this principle to proactively rehearse them and choose your response to specific situations in advance, allowing you to train your mind to respond appropriately in situations when you would normally feel fearful, anxious, and out of control. Now, as I've already shared, we're beginning to discover that the mind and body are more deeply connected than previously imagined, and that simply thinking about or mentally rehearsing a specific event in your mind can result in a biological and physiological change in the real world. This is true for learning scales on the piano, shooting free throws on the basketball court, and for our purposes, taming anxiety and responding to stressful events with a masculine calm, clarity, and deliberation. Which brings me to the meditatio practice. Now, first, you're going to find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed and set a timer for at least 15 minutes, ideally 30 or longer. And to begin, simply take a few deep breaths in and out through the nose. Still your body, relax into the space, and begin to become aware of your body in space. And once you feel settled, I want you to begin to vividly imagine a situation in which you're normally highly reactive. It could be something you experienced in the past, like a specific fight with your ex or a confrontation at work. It could be a recurring situation in which you struggle to respond appropriately, like fearing rejection or struggling to state your needs. Or it could be something that you're planning to do in the future that brings up high levels of anxiety. Whatever it is, begin to imagine the situation in your mind and allow the emotions of that situation to overwhelm you. Feel the fear, the anxiety, the anger. Provoke those negative emotions. Allow them to wash over you. Amplify them until your blood boils and you feel the way you do when you're encountering this situation in the real world. And once you begin to experience the physical sensations of fear and anxiety, begin to imagine yourself choosing your response from a place of power and masculine leadership. Visualize yourself calmly breathing and detaching from the situation. Imagine how you will respond. See yourself wanting to react emotionally, but instead choosing to respond with love, logic, and empathy. Play the situation over and over again in your mind's eye until you feel complete, and then get up, clap your hands, and bring yourself back into the present moment to go about your day. Use this practice anytime you find yourself stuck in a pattern of fearful response or before any high anxiety situation. I promise you'll be amazed by how effective it is. The second practice for mastering your anxiety response and gaining control over your emotions is to retrain your mind-body connection to understand what true anxiety and discomfort really is. You see, the thing is, we live in a world where most people are in a state of chronic stress most of the time. And from an evolutionary standpoint, this is the exact opposite of what we are meant to do. Our bodies are adapted for acute and intense periods of stress, followed by deep relaxation and release. Running from an angry lion, fighting to the death against a rival tribe, combating the elements to survive, that is what we evolved to deal with. We didn't evolve to deal with the chronic, low-grade stress that's so ubiquitous in modern life. And ironically, because our modern lives have become so comfortable and convenient, our brains no longer have a reference point for what real stress is, making these tiny daily stressors that much more intense. So to combat this, we need to recondition our bodies to stress and train them to experience real adversity so that they can more appropriately respond to the small daily attacks we all experience. In other words, we need to create a new stress set point in our bodies. For example, this is why individuals who serve in the military and have seen the horrors of war firsthand seem more resilient to the stresses of professional civilian life. They know what it's like to fight for their lives. They've experienced real stress. So when it comes to managing the stressors of working a 9-to-5 or building a business, they're completely unfazed. Now, luckily, you don't need to dodge bullets or sit through an artillery barrage to reap these same benefits. You simply need to expose your body to intense acute stress to begin resetting your physiological response to stress. And this can be accomplished in a myriad of ways. But my all-time favorite is simple, free, and readily available to every man. Cold showers. Now this practice sucks, and it's supposed to, because the suck is exactly what makes it so powerful. So later today or tomorrow morning, I want you to complete a simple exercise. After taking your normal hot shower, turn the water all the way to cold for at least 60 seconds. Make sure to cover your entire body in the icy water, and if you can handle it, stay under the blast until the cold is simply a sensation. Embrace the suck. Commit to this practice for just 7 days, and you'll be amazed by how it changes your response to stress in just a week. Next up, we have the third and final exercise, something I call centering the frame. And the third and final step to controlling your state is quite simply to keep the adversity you're experiencing in perspective. You see, in our modern lives, it's easy to lose sight of what real suffering really is. It's easy to blow our own suffering out of proportion and turn molehills into mountains. To turn every first world problem that we face into a catastrophe where we curse the universe for forcing us to deal with a broken dishwasher, bumper-to-bumper traffic, or Wi-Fi speed slower than 100 megabytes per second. Now, that's not to say that there is not real suffering that we all experience. Death of a loved one, the loss of our own health, tragic accidents, losses of jobs, and so on. Only to say that most of the suffering we experience is a matter of perspective, not reality. Luckily, the fix is simple. In the same way that exposing yourself to uncomfortable physical stressors like cold showers can help you to reset your physical stress response and maintain your composure, you must also expose yourself to acute psychological and spiritual stressors experienced by others. And the simplest and most accessible way to do this is simply by reading the biographies and historical accounts of the challenges experienced by the men and women who've come before you. Reading books like Lone Survivor or Unbreakable to remind yourself that no matter how bad things might be right now, you aren't crawling through the mountains of Afghanistan with a broken back, bullet wounds, and shrapnel in your leg after witnessing the death of 19 of your closest friends. I know that this might not seem like much, but when you routinely remind yourself of the pain and anguish experienced by others and watch the way that they responded, it begins to reset your understanding of suffering. And sometimes the only thing that you need to pull yourself out of an anxious tailspin is simply to breathe and remind yourself that no matter how bad things are, they could always be worse. Now today, your action steps are simple. First, I want you to complete at least one meditatio malorum meditation before moving on to the next module. Complete instructions for this exercise can be found in your course worksheet. Next, before you begin tomorrow's training, you're going to take a cold shower and allow the icy waters to reset and recalibrate your response to stress. When you're done, be sure to journal your experience inside of the course worksheet. And finally, I want you to pick one book from the resources section of today's lesson and begin going through it each day for at least 15 to 20 minutes. Again, I know that these things might seem simple, but I promise, if you'll take action on each of these prescriptions, you'll begin relating to stress and anxiety in a whole new way. And as a result, you'll begin showing up as a completely different man. I'll see you back here later for the next module.